Let me show you what happened at a company I worked with last quarter. They'd automated their invoice processing. Beautiful system. Zapier pulling data from emails, formatting it, pushing it into their accounting software, saved their finance team hours every week until it didn't. One supplier changed their invoice template, just moved the total from the bottom right to the bottom left. That's it. The automation broke. But here's the thing, it didn't send an alert. It just stopped working. For 3 weeks, invoices piled up in a folder nobody was checking because they thought the system had it handled. When they finally noticed, someone spent 2 full days manually processing the backlog. And that's the pattern I keep seeing across the businesses I work with. Automation that works perfectly until reality shows up. I'm Henry, and I've spent the last decade building automation systems for mid-market and enterprise companies doing tens of millions in revenue. Across dozens of implementations, the pattern is consistent. And the difference between automation that scales and automation that becomes a maintenance nightmare isn't the tools you use. It's whether you're building for rules or building for decisions. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to walk you through 3 things. First, where traditional automation predictably breaks, and it is predictable. Second, what those breaks actually cost in real time and money. And third, how AI-driven automation handles the same problems different. Not through magic, through pattern recognition. Let's start with the reality of how most automation actually works. Here's a typical automation I see companies running. When a form is submitted on the website, extract the data, create a row in a spreadsheet, send a notification to Slack, then create a task in the project management tool. Simple, linear, it works great. Until someone submits a form with a name that includes an apostrophe, like O'Brien, or a company name with special characters like Ben and Jerry's with the ampersand, or a phone number formatted differently than expected, or an email address with a plus sign in it. Any of those, and the automation chokes. Now here's what actually happens next. The form submission sits in limbo. The Slack notification doesn't fire. No task gets created. The lead goes cold because nobody knows they exist. And the finance team? They only realize something's wrong when a customer follows up asking why nobody's responded. This isn't a dramatic explosion. It's a slow leak. Let me show you what this actually costs. Let's say you have an operations lead earning 50k a year. That's roughly £25 an hour. In most businesses I work with, that person spends somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes a day handling failed automations, checking something that didn't process, manually entering the data that should have been automated, updating rules to catch the exception they just found. Let's use the lower end, 30 minutes a day to be conservative. 30 minutes a day times 5 days a week equals 2.5 hours a week. 2.5 hours times 52 weeks in the year equals 130 hours a year. 130 hours is more than 3 full work weeks spent just handling automation failures. At £25 an hour, that's £3,250 a year in time cost just for one person. And here's the thing, that doesn't include the opportunity cost. Those 130 hours could have been spent on actual operations improvement, not babysitting robots. The automation was supposed to save time. Instead, it's created a part-time job managing its failures. Based on what I've seen building these systems, traditional automation fails in 3 consistent places. First, format variation. Your automation expects invoices as PDFs with the total in a specific location. But suppliers don't care about your automation. They change templates, they send Excel files, they use different currencies, they write dates in different formats. Traditional automation can't adapt, it can only match. If the format doesn't match exactly, it breaks. Second, contextual judgment. If a customer emails asking for a refund, traditional automation can route it based on keywords. Maybe it sees refund and sends it to the refunds team. But it can't tell you, is this customer a repeat buyer? Have they had issues before? Is this a £50 refund or a £5,000 refund? Are they frustrated or just inquiring? Those questions require context. Traditional automation doesn't have context, it has commands. Third, sequential dependencies. You automate a step A, then step B, then step C. They all work individually, but if step A fails, step B and C still run because they don't know that A failed. In one company I worked with, they had automated payment scheduling. Brilliant. But when an invoice got rejected, the payment automation didn't know. It scheduled the payment anyway. They only caught it because their accountant manually cross-checked the rejected invoices list, which she now does every week, manually. because she can't trust the automation. That automation was supposed to remove work. Instead, it created a trust problem that requires more manual oversight. Here's the pattern I see consistently. In the first month, your automation handles the straightforward cases. Maybe it processes invoices where everything is standard format, standard amounts, standard vendors. You're pleased. It's working. Month 2, an exception appears. A supplier sends a slightly different format. You update the automation to handle it. And then in the 3rd month, another exception. You add another rule. In the 4th month, 2 more exceptions. You add some conditional logic. In the 6th month, you've got rule on top of rule on top of rule, trying to handle every variation you've encountered. The automation takes longer to maintain than it saves for you. And here's what makes this brutal. Every time you add a rule to catch an exception, you're adding complexity. And every little bit of complexity increases the chance that 2 rules will contrast with each other. I've seen automations so complex that nobody on the team fully understands them anymore. They've become their own beast, fragile, opaque, terrifying to touch, because you don't know what else might break. This isn't failure. This is the natural endpoint of rule-based thinking applied to an inherently variable world. You're basically re-entering the same invoice data by hand every time it doesn't match your template. Now, let me show you how AI automation approaches the same problem from a different angle. Traditional automation asks, does this match my rule? AI automation asks, what pattern does this match? Let me give you a concrete example from a company I worked with recently. They were processing inbound customer service emails. Traditional automation looked for keywords. Contains refund, route to the refunds team. Contains shipping, route to the logistics team. Contains account, route to the accounts team. Seems logical, right? But then they'd get emails like, I need help accessing my account to request a refund for the item I received that's damaged in shipping. Which team should get that? Traditional automation would either pick the first keyword it finds, which isn't ideal, or create a rule for multi-keyword emails, which gets complex, or route everything ambiguous to a human, which defeats the purpose. AI automation looks at the whole email and recognizes the primary intent. This is primarily a refunds issue. The accounts and shipping mentions are context, not separate requests. It routes to refunds with a note about the context, not because you wrote a rule for refund email that also mentions shipping, because it's been trained to recognize the pattern of how people actually write emails when they're primarily seeking a refund. And here's the critical bit. You don't need to anticipate every variation. You show the systems examples of good judgment and it learns what patterns to look for. Let me give you 3 ways this changes how automation actually works. 1, handling format variation. In the invoice processing example from earlier, where the supplier moved the total from bottom right to bottom left, a properly trained AI system can recognize this is still an invoice, the total is still present, just in a different location. Let me extract the relevant information regardless of the layout. It's not magic, it's pattern recognition, trained on thousands of invoice layouts. 2, contextual routing. That customer email about a refund, a well-architected AI system trained on customer interactions can recognize this is from someone who's made 3 purchases in the last 6 months. Their tone suggests frustration, not anger. This is a retention opportunity, not just a refund request. It routes to the retention team with context about purchase history. Same input, different interpretation, based on recognizing patterns in customer behavior. 3, adaptive prioritization. Most traditional automation processes things in order. First in, first out. An AI system trained on request patterns can recognize urgency without anyone explicitly marking something as urgent. This request mentions a deadline. This one uses language suggesting it's routine. This one appears time-sensitive based on context. It reprioritizes automatically. Now here's where I need to be clear about something. AI automation isn't a magic solution that handles everything, and it shouldn't be. When we build these systems, there are clear guardrails. High-risk decisions route to humans, as they should. If an AI system is processing refunds and it encounters a request for £5,000 from a customer whose total purchase history is £200, that gets flagged for human review. Edge cases that are truly unprecedented, human review. Decisions that carry significant financial or reputational risk, human approval. Anything that requires nuanced judgment about relationships or context the system can't fully see requires a human decision. The goal isn't to remove humans from the loop. It is to remove humans from the repetitive, low-risk decisions so they can focus on the high judgment cases that actually benefit from human attention. The automation should handle the routine. The humans should handle the nuance. Here's the shift I want you to think about. Traditional automation is like building a vending machine. Press B7, get crisps every time, no variation. AI automation is more like setting up good processes with someone who has common sense. They follow the process, but they recognize when something doesn't quite fit and needs a human to look at it. What I consistently see in businesses that scale their automation successfully, they're not the ones with the most workflows, they're not the ones with the fanciest tools. They're the ones who stop treating automation like a collection of rigid if-then statements and started treating it like infrastructure, flexible enough to bend without breaking. Because the goal isn't perfect automation. The goal is reliable automation. Automation that reduces the administrative burden on your team so they can focus on work that actually requires human judgment. Not replacing roles, just removing tasks. If you're building automation right now, the question isn't, can I automate this task? The question is, can I automate the decision-making around this task in a way that defers to humans when it needs to? And that requires different thinking than traditional automation. Let me bring this back. Traditional automation breaks in predictable places: format variation, contextual judgment, and sequential dependencies. The cost isn't dramatic, it's cumulative. 3 work weeks a year per person just managing exceptions. AI automation handles the same situation differently because it's built for pattern recognition, not rule following. It adapts to variation without you having to anticipate every single scenario. Rules don't scale. Decisions do.